مرحبا وأهلا بكم في برنامج داخل واشنطن. معكم مضيفكم روبرت ساتلوف. الفشل، الاندحار، الهزيمة، الانهيار، هذه الكلمات تصف ما حدث حين حاول الحزب الجمهوري الذي يسيطر على كل شيء في واشنطن هذه الأيام أن يفي بوعد من وعود الحملة الانتخابية تمثل في إبطال واستبدال خطة الرئيس أوباما للرعاية الصحية. الرئيس ترامب الذي قامت حملته على فكرة تحقيقه لانتصار تلو الآخر فشل في أول جهوده التشريعية الكبرى. لماذا؟ ليس لأن الديمقراطيين هزموه، ولكن لأن الجمهوريين كانوا منقسمين جدا لدرجة أنه تعذر عليهم الحفاظ على وحدة صفوف أغلبيتهم لإقرار قانون إراده الرئيس. بطبيعة الحال فشل بيل كلينتون حين حاول إصلاح نظام الرعاية الصحية وماذا لينعم بواحدة من أكثر الفترات الرئاسية نجاحا في التاريخ المعاصر. هل يمكن أن يتعافى دونالد ترامب من هذه الهزيمة؟ هل الحزب الجمهوري الذي تفوق في المعارضة غير قادر على الحكم؟ هل ستبعث هزيمة ترامب حياة جديدة في الديمقراطيين؟ لمناقشة آثار أول جهد تشريعي للرئيس ترامب يسرني أن أرحب باثنين من مراقبين المتميزين للسياسات في واشنطن، وهما ستيف كليمنز وبراد بليكمان. Welcome back to Dakhel, Washington. President Trump's first effort at a legislative victory went down to stunning defeat. Let's talk about that, and I'm delighted to welcome Steve Clemens and Brad Blakeman to discuss this. So, Steve, what happened?
Well, basically, Speaker Paul Ryan, the leader of the Republican Party in the House of Representatives, and Donald Trump didn't understand how deeply the divides within their own party were over the role of government in providing some access to health care around Americans. They were trying to basically undo Obamacare. And as they came up with an alternative to repeal Obamacare and replace it with something else, they lost a good chunk of their own party that's opposed to virtually any government role in either subsidizing or providing mandates for a number of Americans that were there. And the package came undone, and Speaker Ryan got a taste of what his predecessor, John Boehner, who was Speaker of the House of Representatives, used to struggle with all the time, is that his fights were not only with Democrats, but they were within the Republican Party. So they failed. This came forward, and despite Donald Trump harassing, cajoling, and trying to seduce members of his own party, they finally rebelled and said no. And he got to some very serious threats against some members of the Republican Party. So this was a complete failure of the Republican Party to stand by its own initiatives, if you will.
So, Brad, let's step back for a moment. How is it possible that with years to plan and months since the November election, when it was clear that Republicans would be in complete control, that there isn't a Republican plan to repeal and replace President Obama's health care?
No excuses. No excuses. The fact is they voted over 50 times to repeal when they were in the opposition. They should have had a plan. They've had a long time, 7 years. Obamacare is a failure by any standard. So we know it's going to fail. We can't let it fail. We're in power. There's not any more power the American people could have given us than the White House and both houses of Congress. So it's now on us. We can't let it fail for the American people and for the Republican Party. So here's what needs to be done. Our first attempt didn't go so well. So now we have to regroup. And now you're seeing more of a consensus and more of a negotiation, which probably should have taken place, but for the artificial deadlines which we put on ourselves. That was wrong. So I think now they're going back to the drawing board as the president now moves on to infrastructure and taxes. Healthcare is being worked on, I can tell you that, very seriously by the Freedom Caucus, who are the people who are objecting to the Republican plan, Republicans themselves, but also there's a reach across the aisle to Democrats. So there's a lot of things that are happening now behind the scenes, which should have been happening all along.
But there's a bigger element here. You mentioned Senator Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin is now famous for having made the comment that while a lot of Americans don't know who got them health care, more than 20 million Americans came on to health care and got health care through Obamacare. Manchin said they'll know who took it away. And so one of the other elements of this drama that is cooked up, and I agree that with Brad that they're going to continue to work this out, is the Congressional Budget Office, which scores and looks at the impact of policy, said that not only will the long-term savings of the Republican plan be less than had been previously thought, but 24 million Americans are likely to lose or not have insurance. They may have access, but the truth, the truth that they see is that 24 million Americans will have less. And so that is what, while Senator Manchin is willing to compromise, engage, at the same time, a lot, in fact, 90% of the Republican Party wants to keep most of those Americans in some way covered. And there's a certain very ideologically rigid part of the Republican Party that just will not yield, as far as I can tell, on that element.
But the truth be told, is there are 20 million Americans under the Obamacare who can't afford it and have opted out and are paying penalties instead of the premiums because they can't afford it.
Because the premiums are too high.
The premiums are too high, but also the deductibles are too high. My deductible went up 20% in the state of Virginia. I only have 3 carriers. I'm lucky to have 3. There are some states that have none or 1. There's no competition. So it's a forced market. That's what we need to create, is a better free market in healthcare.
So, look, the president said something which to many people's ears sounds odd, namely, I'm going to let our healthcare system collapse. And when it collapses, that will concentrate the attention of legislators on replacing it with something better.
Well,
Can the President of the United States allow the healthcare system of the United States to collapse?
Of course not. But that was Donald Trump being Donald Trump. When he said that, it sent shockwaves through the Capitol. People were saying, you know what? He's likely to do it. So we have to start regrouping and figuring out a way to solve it. Because don't forget, Donald Trump's not up for re-election for 4 years. The entire House is up in 2 years and a third of the Senate. They have more to lose by not getting a deal at this point than the president does.
Steve, do you agree with that?
I think that the president is intemperate. He is someone who, when Brad said Donald Trump is playing Donald Trump, that is the president of the United States who is sending market signals to the rest of the system on what he is likely to do. And there is sometimes tension between what many of us look at, Republican or Democrat or Independent, as responsible governance, responsible positioning, rather than a reckless comment that the President of the United States would stand by and allow a disaster to happen to force political acquiescence to what he wants. I think it's a very serious statement by Trump. But look, the biggest casualty of the demise of the of their efforts to repeal the Affordable Care Act is the fear of Donald Trump. I think that's what we really need to look at now. And while there may be earnest and good policy coordination, policy development efforts, negotiations to bring everybody back together, what people just saw is Donald Trump and Speaker Ryan lose as Donald Trump puffed up, threatened, harassed, threatened Republicans that he would primary them and run people against them. But the point is, people will fear Donald Trump less next round, in my view.
The LBJ was famous for doing exactly what Donald Trump has done. No more effective leader on the Democratic side than President Johnson. He'd get in your face. He would call people down to his office. He'd go up on the Hill. He was somebody who was a dealer
and he would
and
win.
A closer. He won, but he also lost some, didn't he?
Do you think
you don't win all the time?
Do you think Donald Trump will run or campaign against Republicans who stood in the way of progress on this issue?
I don't think it'll come to that because I think that a deal is going to be made. And right now, I think Republicans understand they cannot let it fail. It's on us as Republicans to fix that which the Democrats broke, and we have to do it. And we're going to do it. If at first you don't succeed, try again. That's the American credo, and that's exactly what's going to happen. You may fail the first time. It's not how you start, it's how you finish.
So you mentioned Democrats. I wanted to ask about this. One can only imagine that Democrats on Capitol Hill are gleeful at the the chaos
Parties
inside
broke
the
out all over
Republican Party.
Washington. I think there is a little bit of, I was with a number of leading Democrats of the previous administration over at a conference in Europe, and when this was all falling apart, someone said, I'll take my Schaden with my Freude. So using the term Schadenfreude, saying, that it's a German term saying, it's an empathy with your misery kind of thing. And I think that there are many Democrats that were happy to see this go just because of what we were just talking about, is that I think they are dismayed by Donald Trump's brinksmanship behavior and recklessness with how he's framed it. He's gone from saying at various times he wanted to insure all Americans, which sent shockwaves through some of the quarters of Republican halls, to something, he's shifted quite a bit. And I think the biggest concern that people have had about Donald Trump is whether he himself understands the public policy elements he's putting forward or not. There are a lot of people who doubt that he has that facility with the policies that he is promulgating and that he's trying to seduce others in. Most of the people on the Republican side that I have spoken to who've had encounters say that he just isn't aware of what's in the own packages that he's pursuing. Democrats love to hear that because it gives them an opportunity, they think, to really take him down the road.
So, Brad, should Democrats be pleased? I mean, they had a good week, but should they be pleased in the bigger picture?
No, they created this mess. I don't know how they could be joyful. They created the mess, which is Obamacare. It is going to collapse. There's no question about it if Republicans don't fix it. It can't work. It was never meant to work. Democrats were hoping to get Hillary in and then switch to a one-payer, government-paid healthcare system. That was their plan all along. It was destined for failure. So how could you be joyful at the fact that you've created something that is an abstract failure, and the fact that the Republicans couldn't fix it doesn't stop the fact that it's going to be dead by its own weight?
Okay, well, when we come back after the break, we're going to take this discussion about healthcare and put it in the larger framework of looking at the Trump administration after 2 months in office, victories, defeats, and where we're heading next in just a moment. So our guests today include Steve Clemons. Steve is Washington editor-at-large for one of America's premier news, opinion, and literary magazines, The Atlantic, and he's editor of Atlantic Live. He is also a senior fellow and founder of the American Strategy Program at the New America Foundation, a prominent think tank here in Washington. Steve writes and speaks frequently about the Washington political scene, foreign policy, and national security issues. To his left is Bradley Blakeman. Brad is a prominent Republican political strategist and currently a principal of the 1600 Group, a public policy firm. In the George W. Bush administration, he served on the president's senior staff as deputy assistant to the president for appointments in scheduling, vetting, research, and correspondence. In the private sector, he served as president and chief executive officer of Freedom's Watch, a nonprofit conservative advocacy group responsible for creating and supervising over $60 million in television, radio, and print media advertising campaigns. An attorney by training, he appears regularly as a conservative political commentator on such news outlets as Fox News, MSNBC, BBC, Al Jazeera, and CNN. He is also an award-winning professor of public policy, politics, and international affairs at Georgetown University. So, gentlemen, let's take a look at the healthcare debacle or controversy and put it in the larger framework. How does this episode fit in with the other politics swirling around the Trump administration, immigration, executive orders, the Russia issue? Brad.
Well, I think he certainly has had the most eventful 70 days of any president in modern history. That's for sure. It's steeped in controversy, but it's also steeped in success. The president has done a lot by executive order, by pen, but he's also been working on legislation. Now, the setback he's had in Obamacare, I predict, will turn into a plus, a success. It's going to happen down the road. I believe it's going to happen this year, 2017, because as we move to 2018, we're getting into the midterms, and everything gets political then. Hard to legislate when people are campaigning. But now we move to infrastructure, improving America's bridges, roads, tunnels, airports, very popular on both sides of the aisle, I believe, because there's such need for it. Tax reform, it's been long overdue. The last time we had tax reform in America was in the 80s. Our tax code is antiquated, nobody understands it, it invites litigation, it's confusing. Tax rates, too high, especially corporate and individual, have to help people move up the ladder into the middle class. So they're very good things happening on the horizon for Donald Trump, but we have to get past this first 100 days. And I think it's been a tumultuous 100 days for Donald Trump by any stretch of the imagination. Some self-inflicted, but also some brought on by a overactive court with his executive order on immigration. So a lot on Donald Trump's plate. The jury's still out. I give him till the fall to really take a full and fair assessment. It's not any longer 100 days for American presidents. I believe it's the first year.
All right. Steve?
I wouldn't, I mean, I appreciate Brad's glasses half full. I know that's a colloquialism, but a glasses half full view that he's largely optimistic about it. Never in modern presidential history has a U.S. president been handed defeat so early in his tenure by his own party. So that will have consequences, and I think it's going to make give a harder time for Donald Trump to achieve some of the things he wants to do. It's interesting that so many are celebrating the executive orders, which he's created theater out of, almost a kind of reality TV show of signing executive orders with the cast of his cabinet and most senior advisors behind him, because the GOP went crazy when President Obama engaged in executive orders on everything in response to a paralyzed Congress that just couldn't move. President Obama began doing that, and
a lot of what he's doing is undoing the executive orders.
Some undoing and some promulgating, particularly on immigration.
Most of the executive orders that have been signed by the president was undoing the executive orders of Barack Obama. So they're not proactive executive orders. These aren't something new. He's rolling back that which Barack Obama has done.
He's asserting the position of the executive, and he has not yet really put his foot down and shown what he can do, I think, legislatively. Now, where I think that they should have started or could have started and achieved a lot more consensus across parties is exactly what Brad said on infrastructure, on tax reform. There's a lot of pent-up hope that something can happen on tax reform, because there are a lot of distortions in the global economy and in investment in the United States that could be undone with some constructive tax reform, and there are a lot of Democrats who want to see that happen. And you also have those that want to look at how do you really drive more dollars into infrastructure and create an opportunity for building out more opportunities for the middle class. Had he started there, I think the Donald Trump story would be very, very different. Now he's going to try and go into that, they say. We'll see if they can pull together a consensus, because they still have a problem in the GOP caucus, I think, with that, because they have pay-as-you-go, and you've got very strict libertarians inside the GOP that really want to minimize the government's role in providing inputs into the economy and doing certain things like that. So they may run into the same kind of equation problem that they had on healthcare repeatedly as they try and do things. So I think that's one of the consequences.
I mean, you've both hinted at legislative initiatives that might reach across the aisle. Other than Joe Manchin and a couple of conservative Democrats, which is a pretty dying breed, I think it's fair to say, is there a real prospect of reaching across the aisle for these things? And do you expect this to be the inclination of Donald Trump, who hasn't so far been reaching across the aisle?
Well, the good news is we have the numbers working in our side. In the House, we need 216, but we have a healthy majority. We can stand to lose 15, 20 Republicans and make up some Democrats. So it's not a huge amount that we would need to lose or get. Now, in the Senate, it gets a little dicier because our margins are slimmer. But again, when you're talking about bipartisan legislation, infrastructure is bipartisan.
Right.
It's helping out people in their districts. It's bringing home the bacon, so to speak, of giving people something that they need and they want. So that's very popular in America. When you can deliver a dam or a bridge or a road or an airport in your district, it suddenly becomes very popular. So. And very selfish, by the way, because remember, there's no more earmarks where Congress was allowed to do this themselves. That's gone. So you have to get it through negotiation in a bill. And it's got to be in the sunlight. People have to know how the money's being spent. So that's infrastructure. I also think taxes are very attractive because it opens it up to negotiation. And also, a dirty word in Washington has been compromise. Donald Trump is a transactional man. He's not an ideologue, and some say that he's not really a Republican, right?
What do you say?
I say he's a Republican, but there are some who say he's not Republican enough. But that's okay. A transactional president is actually a good thing because he's going to be able to compromise and reach across the aisle and make deals. Maybe not on health care because that's too radioactive. But on these other things, I think it's very possible.
So, Steve, sometimes presidents, when they have trouble at home, they go abroad and look for successes and victories elsewhere. Is that a possible path for Donald Trump?
Well, he's certainly shaken up a lot of allies.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. Pleasure to have you both here on Dakhel, Washington. بهذا نصل إلى نهاية هذه الحلقة من برنامج داخل واشنطن. إذا كانت لديكم أي استفسارات أو تعليقات حول هذه الحلقة وخاصة حول آثار الفشل الداخلي على السياسة الخارجية الأمريكية، أرجو أن تراسلوني مباشرة على عنوان البريد الإلكتروني التالي insidewashington@elhura.com. معكم روبرت ساتلوف. شكرا لكم وإلى اللقاء.